Hey, thank you very much. Appreciate coming here. I haven't had to do this because of COVID. I kind of got shut down doing programs. But yes, I live at Put-in-Bay, but we did spend 4 years here in 1997 and 2001 because we had 2 children and we wanted to get them off Put-in-Bay so they could experience life in the real world, more extracurricular activities and such. Of course, I was born in Avon Lake, lived in Avon Lake, and we always went to our cottage at Middle Bass Island. My father, Edward Brohl, he's the 3rd generation Sanduskyan, and they had Brohl and Apple plumbing. So, yes, but my grandfather didn't want my dad to be a plumber, so he wasn't a plumber. But every time we'd go to Middle Bass Island, we always had to drive through Huron. And ever since I was born, I love boats. I think I came out of the womb loving boats because I could make a boat out of anything. I could make it out of an ashtray, an ice cube tray. It didn't matter. I had my parents get up in the morning and stepping on little wooden blocks of boats. So anyhow, we lived on the water in Avon Lake. Always watched the ships go by. Always trying to figure out what company it was. Each stack had its own design. And then we went to Middle Bass Island. Got to be on the water there. I used to hang out at the ferry dock at Middle Bass Island. And the first slide here, it's not very clear, but that little guy there is me. And there's some of the old Miller Ferry Line, one of the old Erie Isle Parker boat line. And this gentleman, which I'm sorry isn't there, I used to go down there and catch the lines. So I got to know all the guys on the ferry boat. They throw me bubble gum and pop, and I was living on top of the world. So all I wanted to do when I got older was be a ferry boat captain. So I graduated in 1975, and first of all, is there any sailors here? Is there any merchant sailors? Is there pleasure boat sailors? Okay, good. And any boat nerds? All right. So, obviously, you're driving through Huron, and I wanted to see if there's a boat at the Huron ore dock, and so I knew them all. And in fact, the first time I was on a boat, I got on at the Huron ore dock and got off at Huron ore dock. Anyhow. So this is what I did. I would go down to the dock and watch the boats come in. They'd throw a line, and I'd put it on the spile and thought I was pretty cool. So in 1975, I graduated, and I worked for Miller Boat Line. I just got out of high school. The next day I left Avon Lake. I was on that boat, the West Shore, running from Middle Bass to Catawba. And, of course, it's no longer there. We used to load the cars by hand, lift planks, drive cars, and pack them real tight. And it was pretty cool. I thought it was nice. So I did that in 76. And then 77, they put me down in a bilge, and they gave me a scraper and a paintbrush and no ventilation, no nothing. And that's why I got to think, well, maybe I should think about doing something else. So my father came and said, there's a maritime school up in Traverse City, Michigan, where you can go to a 3-year program and you get your license. And on the Great Lakes, you also have to be a licensed pilot, which on the deep sea you don't have to have. If you go on the coast or whatever, you notice that the pilot will always come aboard. Well, we don't have to have a pilot because we're all licensed as pilots. It's a very extensive examination. But anyhow, so I went to the Maritime Academy. At that time, they didn't have an operating training ship. We just had a bunch of boats that sat at the dock. But anyhow, it was a 3-year, year-round program, and you would spend 9 months on a merchant ship learning the job. And we were pretty green when we came out of that school. In 1979, we graduated, and there I got my license, and it's a week-long exam. Mostly open book, one multiple choice question thing, and then to give you a blank chart of the Great Lakes, you have to fill in every lighthouse, what its characteristics is, all the courses, distances on it, and then you have to do the rivers, which is St. Clair, Detroit River, St. Mary's River. Again, you had to know all the courses, you had to put all the lights, the buoys, the numbers, the characteristics, you had to know all the lighthouses. It's excruciating trying to memorize all that stuff. So anyhow, we finally got our licenses, and this was our class. We started with 50, and only this many graduated because people think they're going to love being on a ship. But until you get on one, it's hard to really explain what it's like to be on a ship. So I thought, okay, this is 1979. Every steamship company had a job for you. They had promised you the world. And, you can be a captain in 10 years, blah, blah, blah. Well, Miller Boat Line said, look, you could be a captain for us if you want. Hey, there's my first opportunity to be a captain. And I also found my wife that year because she worked at Perry's Monument. But this is my first captain's job to William Miller. And she's now up in Saginaw River as the Princess Winona. And thought that was pretty cool. But I knew at Labor Day I was going to ship out. And Interlake Steamship Company, based out of Cleveland, had a job for me. So my first, that was my first captain's job. My first single screw boat I got to learn was the Put-in-Bay, the second Put-in-Bay, not the steamer Put-in-Bay. Now there's another Put-in-Bay. That is up at Mackinac Island now. It's been stretched 35 feet and hardly recognizable. So all these boats are still around. That West Shore is up at Mackinac Island also. So there I am, third mate. I think I knew what I was doing, but I really didn't know what I was doing. I had a lot of people keep me out of trouble. Usually you had a wheelsman that was like really up in years, and he knew how to wheel a boat. He made me look good. So that was actually my first job. It was the Charles M. Beagley, which is 806 feet long. At that time, it didn't have an unloading boom on it. You still had to get unloaded at the Hewlett's. I know this boat was in Huron quite a bit. It's 806 feet wide, which is about as big as you're going to get in Huron, I think. Get around that corner. So, all's well there. Soon I got on, a month later, I'm on a 1,000-foot ship. And I'd never been on a 1,000-foot ship before. This is the Mesabi Minor. This also ended up being my first relief job when I had to finally get enough time to get my master's license. This is 1,000 feet, 6 inches long, 6 feet long, by 105 feet wide. It was built in Lorain, Ohio. This was the second 1,000-footer built on the Great Lakes. Now this is in 1979. 1980, you remember the economy tanked. We were now a global economy, and everything changed. All those companies that said they had a job for you, half those companies were out of business in 2 years. And all the boats were gone. Half these boats were gone. So I got laid off. I went to Put-in-Bay. I knew I could get a job at the ferry lines. I ran fishing charters. I ran the Sunny S inter-island ferry boat, whatever you could do to make money. Of course, it's always great to have children when you're laid off. We got that down good. And I worked for Parker Boat Line, another line. Now, this boat hauled 6 cars, and it went from Port Clinton to Put-in-Bay. It soon got bought up, and now the Jet Express does that service. Wasn't bad. I mean, I was still having fun. So that ended, and I got back to work 2 years later in 1984. I'm going to show you, I worked for one company, Interlake Steamship Company. I got lucky. They didn't go out of business. Like a lot of my friends, they thought, man, you should have gone with this company. You should have gone with that company. Well, I lucked out. Interlake was a family-owned company, and they still are. And so I did well. But anyhow, this is one of the ships. This is actually a World War II T2 tanker. It's the Leator Girther. It was originally a Cleveland Cliffs boat. What they did is in 1952, we had the Korean conflict. They couldn't build enough ships on the Great Lakes. So as you probably a lot of you know, they brought, boats that were built, at the end of World War II, big gas guzzlers, C4s, and this is a T2 tanker. They put a new midsection in. They cut down the cabins, and they brought up through the Mississippi because the St. Lawrence Seaway wasn't open. Anyhow, this is one of the ships. She was a steamer at that time, and this is what it looked like before it was converted to a lake ship. And there's probably 6 or 7 of these that were around. But like I said, they burned a lot of fuel, and as you know, the price of fuel went crazy. And in the 70s, they were no longer, unless they put a boom on them, they really weren't sailing anymore. I did sail this boat when it was a steamer, but now all our steamers have been converted to diesels, and it's all pilot house controlled. It's all run by computer screens, and it's all changed. It's very nice to have controls in the wheelhouse, but when you're on a steam turbine, you have to answer Chad Byrne, and the guy in the engine room has to turn steam throttles, and they'd only back like 70% backing on them, but that's probably more than you need to know. This is the largest ship on the Great Lakes, the Paul Arthur Girther. When she was built, she was a William J. Delancey, and in 1981, she was built in Lorain, Ohio, and I was able to come out as a third mate on that boat. This boat's the one that has all the passenger quarters, guest quarters. We had a passenger porter on there. We had a galley up there where people got served food, all the booze they wanted, and it was and it entertained all the executives. Now they give rides on this boat, but they usually donate to fundraisers. And our company is very nice to donate a couple of trips to our museum on Put-in-Bay, Lake Erie Islands Historical Society, Because already somebody asked me about, how do I get a trip on a boat? Pretty much you buy a raffle ticket. Or if you order like 100,000 tons of limestone, that's another way to get on there. If you got enough room in your driveway for it. But so this is the largest ship by 7 whole feet, because it's 1,013 feet long, 105 feet wide. This is a look in the wheelhouse. That's me in the back. I'm kind of fast forwarding because you have to get enough time as a mate before you can ride an unlimited tonnage license. So in 1987, I was able to achieve that, and I had to wait my turn, and then I went relief captains. And this is the Paltergurtha. This gentleman here is the wheelsman. He turns the wheel. You tell him which way to go. You say start it right, start it left. Sometimes you have to give him faster, slower. Deep sea guys or saltwater guys, you say put 30 degrees left rudder, right rudder. You do a lot of confined waters. You're always piloting. You're always near land. We are terrestrial navigators, not celestial navigators. So I'm really old because we didn't have GPS back in the day. And you used to shoot visual bearings to get your distance off, figure your speed, the clock, the stopwatch, all that stuff. Now, these kids, I'm still a kid, right? They just, all I got to do is push this button. It tells me where to go. The boat steers itself from one end of the lake to the other, keeps it exactly on course. It makes all the turns. So they're taking the fun out of the job. So this is what it looks like being on the end of a 1,000-footer. Now, we had the traditional Lakers that had the forward-end pilot house, and the engine room was back aft. All the forward-end people lived up forward, which was beautiful because you didn't have to sit on top of engines and propeller shafts. All you had to do was open your porthole, and all you heard was the water in the lake. Great sleeping. Except when you're going through ice, because then it's like bam, 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 and it gets so quiet you fall asleep. And then you hit another piece of ice, and bam, 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 you wake up again. But these 1,000-footers, everybody's back aft. So this is what it's like to try to go into the pole lock up the Sioux. It's 105 feet wide. The lock is 110 feet wide. It does fit, I believe it or not. But what will you do when you come into a lock is you ride a timber. They have all these timbers along, and you just hold the bow up against it, and you kind of squeeze it in. But the hard part is you have to displace all that water in the lock, and if you're loaded, it takes a while. You got to push all that water in, and then when you get out, you got to try to kind of pull the water back in, and it's real slow. It takes an hour to get into that lock and out of that lock. Has anybody been to the Sioux locks before? Yeah, I need to say no more. And so, one of the biggest things about sailing this boat is, one of the big worries is wind, waves, fog, and ice. So this is up, we always would load, like this is Western coal. They loaded Western coal, totally opposite what it used to be. They always took Southern coal, took it up north and brought ore back. Now they brought this from the Montana Power Basin down to the various power plants. Still do it. They bring them to Monroe and Detroit. Anyhow, I'm babbling here. But this is trying to back into the dock in the wintertime. We don't use tugs. We do all our own ship handling, which is a real cool art form, I think, because ocean guys, they usually, when they get to a port, the harbor pilot takes it in, and they have to have lots of tugs to push it. We have a bow thruster. Don't have stern thrusters on the 1,000-footers, but you have twin engines, so you can maneuver fairly well. So this is coming into Duluth Piers, and that get pretty wild when it's blowing because there's a lot of weird currents, and it could be difficult. So this is a winter picture coming into Duluth Harbor, and it's a beautiful. Anybody been to Duluth? That's what everybody goes to see the boats into Duluth. It's a big deal, and you get to come in and you blow the whistle, and all these people stand and wave at you like that to see these boats come through. And it could be 20 below zero at 4 in the morning, and there'll be some idiot out there waiting for the boat to come in. And you'd go out and wave, and I'd go, "Hi, Mom!" And everybody's looking around, "Oh, this guy's mom's here." Like, well, no, my mom wasn't there. But you got to have fun with it. And in Sioux Lock, I'd always wave, "Hey, everybody," and they wave back. And maybe I waved at you guys. I don't know. Anyhow, this is me looking out the front window. It's cold. It's always cold up north. They have 2 winters, winter and almost winter, they call it. This is my first, I was 13 years, because I decided to work for Miller Boat Line my first year with my license. 5 other my classmates got in ahead of me, so I had to wait my turn. But anyhow, I finally got my first permanent job. This is the Herbert C. Jackson, built in 1959. It was built in Detroit. It was the next boat built after the Edmund Fitzgerald. I don't know if you guys ever heard of that boat. She's not floating right now. But this is a beautiful boat, and it's a beautiful handling boat. And she's been in Huron quite a bit as a straight decker. I used to come into Huron to Huron Lime also, but I never came in as a captain. I did come in as a mate. It was our last trip, and the old Showboat was open. The Showboat restaurant right across there. First mate says, "Hey everybody, if you want to take the workboat, you can go over and have a drink." Well, sailors don't just have a drink. So, and we got to get the boat cleaned up. We're going to lay up and clean. Last trip, these guys came back. They were all wasted. The guys fell out of the workboat, which is a like 60-foot aluminum outboard, because you can't come up against the dock at the stone dock. You have to use a workboat to get back and forth. So they fell in the water, and then the next thing you know, no one couldn't get them up to work, and then they're fighting, and so that's not a good story to tell, but. And I never got to bring a boat into the ore dock. I went on vacation, they came into the ore dock. And we lived there for 4 years, we lived in Huron, and I never got to come into Huron. But we went to Lorraine all the time, so that was okay. So it was a nice, easy drive, and I got to spend New Year's Eve and Christmas Eve at home with my family, briefly. Okay, so this is her again, and she's beautiful lines. Unfortunately, she was started as a coal burner, and they put a boom on it, kind of ruined it. But this is going into Port Washington. We were the last coal boat ever when they closed the power plant now. So we had an open house there. Anyhow, some of these pictures, I think the clouds up in Lake Superior are just phenomenal, So I'm just kind of showing us going underway. Probably going to go low tower in Marquette, Michigan. This is kind of a picture of our mooring winches. We use cables, and these chocks for the fairlead for your wires are called rolling chocks because they rotate around and on rollers, and they're self-tensioning winches. We use them a lot because a lot of these docks we have to shift a lot up and down these docks to load. You notice this is what you do when you're not working. You're sleeping. Prior to cable satellite TV, there's a lot of card games on the boats. You could always get a hockey game up at Lake Superior, I think, year-round, but you didn't have very good TV reception. So once we got satellite TV, all the poker games end, everybody just goes to their room and sits in their lazy boy rockers and sleep. This is looking out into the cargo hold now because we are now self-unloaders. This would be the slopes of the cargo hold. You're looking down from up in the hatch, and they're hosing it out. They're getting ready for a new product or whatever, or getting the sticky cargo to go down. This would be the unloading belt that runs down below. There's gates every 24 feet that you open and close, and you got to control the flow of the cargo because you don't want to overload the system, and the belt will break and it stops, and then you got to shovel, and it gets ugly. So best thing about the boat, the food. We if you got a good cook, you got a happy crew, and we had some really good cooks. We had some really bad cooks too. Back when I first started, they were all meat and potato guys. We had some meat burners. We call them meat burners. And it was meat and potatoes. The diet wasn't very good, but you got a lot of gravy. We used to have like 3 porters. We'd have 2 cooks, a second cook. This would be the second cook every day. You had fresh bread, pastries in the morning, always fresh desserts, always cookies at coffee break. It's some serious belly packing, but a lot of sailors, when they retired, they all died because they were so poor health. So eventually we got like salad bars, and we got to improve our diet. We put exercise machines on the boats and for the better. But anyhow, this is a picture of the galley. This is on the Mesabi Minor. This is more cafeteria style seating where you would come through, get your plate. The officers eat on one side, the unlicensed people would eat on the other side. Traditionally, the old boats, you got waited on, and they had white cloths, and you used to have to dress for dinner if you were an officer. With some of the old timers, you had to wear khakis, your uniform, to come and eat. That don't have to do that anymore, but shoes and shirt are required. So anyhow, that's one of the biggest things about every day you just eat phenomenal, all the food you want. So this was lunch actually, but this was a Sunday. This dinner he didn't cook in the Sundays, but you always had 2 entrees, always a lot of vegetables. Sometimes they were mushy, overcooked, but sometimes we were good. So anyhow, we get you might have heard about the mail boat in Detroit. How do you get your mail? Well, we used to get mail to Sioux or in Detroit. Of course, this is the only 24-hour, 7-day-a-week post office in the United States right here. So this is the JWS Scouts. They would come out alongside while you're underway. They call it mail in a pail. You lower a 5-gallon pail down with a line. They put your whatever you need, and they'll sell you stamps, they'll sell you soda pop, blah, blah, blah. We do crew exchanges. You'd have to go down the ladder. You can see a line here where he's lowering the bucket down, and there you go. It's a better picture of it. And they're still running to this day. And this is a pilot boat. They're bringing some parts because you're moving 24/7. We never stop. You work all night. That's the problem with being a captain, is because you're never the same schedule. One time you're working at 2 in the morning till 10 in the morning, and then next thing you know, you got to be up at 9 o'clock at night, and it's grueling. That's why it's a young man's job. And the Herbert C. Jackson being a smaller boat, we had shorter runs, so we would say we'd unload in Detroit, then we'd come to Sandusky and load. We take that load up to Detroit, unload that, to come back down, get another load of coal out of Toledo, Sandusky, take it up to the Sioux. Your longest stretch you had off was like 14 hours across Lake Huron. But there's a lot more to that. But anyhow, this is a picture of Herbert C. Jackson. This is the Blue Water Bridge. We're coming down off Lake Huron. There's about a 5-mile-an-hour current coming underneath this river, and it's one way now because they had a collision back in like 1972. And so now it's one way. These are the hatches. You notice they're all spaced. These are 24 feet apart. Why are they 24 feet apart? Because we'll get to it in a minute. This is the hatch crane that takes the hatches off. You have the little clamps here that they use a wrench to tighten it. And the nickname, this is the Iron Deckhand. So, where are we at here? The old Huron lightship. You used to have lightships instead of lighthouses. You probably knew that. You can go on that. That's very nice. Run by a historical site up in Port Huron. Anybody guess that sailing boat? Nailed it. Absolutely. Absolutely. This is another ship coming alongside. We were in port, I don't know where. This is the K. Barker, was originally the Edward B. Green, built for Cleveland Cliffs in 1952. This was the last ship ever built in Toledo, Ohio. So they had that extra. They have nice passenger quarters also. Obviously, that was the flagship of Cleveland Cliffs, and I'm sure all the high muckety mucks got to ride that boat. Of course, they have a fully stocked bar for all the passengers, and some of them don't ever come out of the cabins. I don't know why. Must be the free booze. So she's a nice passenger boat also. Here we're coming alongside of another 1,000-foot ship. We're loaded. The steamers, the traditional boats, we don't have like 25, 30 feet of freeboard. Like when we're loaded, we'd only have like 7 or 8 feet of freeboard in the summer. Of course, they have load lines where you load lighter in the winter because of the stormy season. In the summer, you load as deep as you can. That's why if we always have a term about somebody that drank too much the night before, that we said you must have been down to your midsummer marks, which is the deepest you can load. In fact, you got loaded. Is what your point was. You got loaded drinking, and then they wouldn't show up for work the next morning. And you say, "Well, you had a little hard time getting away from the dock, did you?" Because they couldn't get out of the bed. So a lot of little sayings like that. Picture of another ship that we're meeting, American Century. Obviously, it's changed owners over the years. There's the mate in the front window piloting. You got the steering pole in front of you. This is obviously the Herbert C. Jackson. This is one of the old Maritimes built in 1942. As you know, they had a building program to build new tonnage during World War II. So the government paid for these new boats, and you trade in your old boats. And this boat is still sailing. She's in Marblehead a lot. It's probably been in Sandusky quite a bit there. The only thing that keeps them going is that they have booms on them. But they're probably won't be around too much longer. This is the oldest ship, the oldest steamer that ever sailed on the Great Lakes. There was the Southdown Challenger, and she hauls cement. And of course, originally came out as an ore boat. It had many, many different names. I got to go on that with a friend of mine because she was old. It's a neat old boat. And the passenger quarters were built where the old coal bunkers were back aft, way back here. And I think in 2013, they finally, they put a notch in and made a tug out of it, which now you see a lot of these ships that they took the engine room out, they put a notch in, and they put a tug in it. The whole reason is because all you have to do is man a tugboat. You don't have to man a ship anymore. So when you man a tug, all you got to have is 2 licensed captains. You don't have to have able seamen. You don't have to have engineers. You don't have to have all the licenses. So you're cutting your crew basically in half. That's the only reason they do it. And of course, these boats are so big, you really can't take these tugs out of the notch, we call it, and put it on a tow line because there's so much weight. And The towing is an art form all in itself. Anyhow, this boat is now a barge, so unfortunately, and this pilot house is at the museum in Toledo right now. But anyhow, it was fun. My friend was nice to have us on board, and they ran out of Charlevoix and did mostly Lake Michigan. These are the littoral boats that they're building in Marionette, Menominee, and they go like 50 mile an hour. I don't know if you guys have read about this. They still have like 5 more to build. They're already scrapping the ones that aren't even 5 years old because they were supposed to have this fancy anti-submarine missile system that, I don't know, I was going to say Raytheon, but probably Raytheon was supposed to have for it. Well, they never came up with the design. They never had the missile. So now it's a boat without a mission. So they're building these brand new boats. They're for shallow water. But the sad part is that now the Navy's building them, and it's cheaper to scrap them than to try to modify them. And which is even sadder is they got to build 5 more because they're still contracted for 5 more for boats they don't even want, they don't even need. But anyhow, they're pretty cool to see a boat this size go 50 mile an hour. But they kick up a huge wake, and they did a sea trial in Green Bay, and I guess they swamped all these boats because they had like a 10-foot wave. And true, it really happened. And so anyhow, little sideline. Another thing about being on a ship, obviously, sailboats have the right-of-way out in the lake. But to try to get a big ship to go around sailboats when you're meeting a sailboat regatta, it's kind of like, you kind of do this thing and just kind of cover your eyes. Sort of like, all the little jet skis now that want to show off their girlfriends. See how close you can get to a boat. It's really cool. It's not so cool, Chop up your propeller if you're not careful. But, this happens all the time. Sailboats, and they're like, hey, get out of my way. I'm like, I'm trying. All right, so this is where the captain lives in the Herbert C. Jackson. This would be my quarters up here. That way it's a pretty easy drive to your office to go to work. All you have to do is go up a flight of stairs and you're in your office. I don't have to deal with rush hour traffic. I don't have to deal with anything. Pretty nice. These are the passenger quarters on this boat also. It has 4 staterooms, and they don't carry too many passengers anymore. But anyhow, this is an osprey nesting on a navigation light in the St. Mary's River. You get to see a beautiful, beautiful wildlife and such when you get away from the cities, and you have to appreciate every moment of that. This is, again, now we're going to go into the Mack lock, the smaller lock in the Herbert C. Jackson. This is the big lock, the Poe lock. The Mack lock with the other 2 locks they're 800 feet long and 80 feet wide. The Jackson is 75 feet wide and 700 feet long. So you got to squeeze in that, but you get to be close to all the viewing stands and all the people. You could talk to everybody and say, hey, what are you carrying? We say ping pong balls or, slaves. We carry slaves. But I got one time the crew put a sign on there and said, please don't feed the deckhands. I thought that was pretty cute. All right, so we land our own men on the dock. This is a landing chair, a bosun chair, and they swing them out over the side, and then they lower them on a line down on the dock. So we don't need line handlers on the dock. Sometimes we wish we did. There we are in the lock, and we got to get up in the lock there. Of course, you got to get up before you can get down in the lock. Just a picture of how much clearance you have in the lock. And once you're in the lock, you pretty much don't need to run your thrusters because there's no place for the boat to go. It might bang up either side of the lock. And more pictures, the viewing stands, the locks. You guys have all seen that. And see the gates when they raise you up about 20 minutes to get raise you in the locks. And the doors are open. We're heading out of the locks. This is a guy's girlfriend talking to him on the boat. He's on his phone on the rail talking to his girlfriend. She's talking to him, I don't know what they're talking about, but anyhow, that's what you got to do to get together with your partner because it's very difficult. Famous Sulak tour boats, the Barkers, who I used to work for, just bought this company, and so anyhow, that's kind of cool. Leaving the lock, heading upbound. How we get our groceries? We have a grocery boat up in the Sioux. We nickname it the Grub Boat, and they bring out your groceries, and they come alongside when you just get down below the locks. Come alongside. They have a crane. Lifts the groceries on pallets onto your deck. They bring supplies, oil drums, and blah, blah, blah. And kind of neat thing to do. Like I say, we don't stop. We keep moving. About the Benson Ford at Put-in-Bay. This is an old cement boat down by Detour that they brought in and they put on rollers and off a barge and put it up on the beach. That Benson Ford is pretty cool, by the way. I thought that was pretty neat at Put-in-Bay. It's too bad they won't open for tours. You think of the history of that Ford Motor Company where Henry Ford was going to build a car from the ground up, literally. So anyhow, when we're out in the lake, when we get a chance, you're always cleaning, you're always scrubbing. And this is the boys rolling out some deck paint. Here we're going to come into the ore dock up in Marquette. Traditionally, this is how they loaded ore all the time. It was gravity-fed dock where you pull alongside, the trains come up top, they dump into these silos. Now these chutes are every 12 feet apart, and they'll put like 5 or 6 rail cars in there, and which would be about 450 tons. You dump them, and then you shift the boat 12 feet, then you take another run down the deck. On a ship, you have to distribute your cargo evenly. Well, not necessarily evenly. You want to put more on the ends and in the middle because of the buoyancy situation. Anyhow, so when you get done towards the end, you trim with like one car, and you shift up and down these docks. They're like 1,500 feet long, and it's long, tedious, but they've been doing it for 125 years this way. But you can't really load a 1,000-foot ship at these docks. You can, but these chutes don't go out far enough, so all the cargo goes inboard, so you're going down the lake crooked. Or you turn around and you load the other side. It's been done, and I've done it. It's not fun. They have huge ore docks in Superior, Wisconsin. They don't use them anymore. So this is being used, and in 2 harbors they use, 2 harbors, Minnesota also. This is we're coming in behind another ship. This is a 1,000-footer that's unloading coal into a hopper for a power plant. One of our ships, the James R. Barker, the first 1,000-foot ship built on the Great Lakes, entirely built on the Great Lakes, because they did build that Stuart J. Court, but the stern and bow came in from the deep sea. Here we are. We're loading limestone up at Drummond Island. Loaded at Marblehead quite a bit. It's not one of our favorite places to go. It was one of my favorite places to go because I could go home. That's the best thing about being a captain is you don't have to work in port. So anytime I could get home. In my last couple of years, we used to go to Sandusky a lot, so I'd ride my bike down, get on Jet Express, go home, put in bay. And should have been sleeping, but I didn't. There's quite a few. Obviously, there was a lot of coal docks at one time in the lower lakes. You had one in Huron. I remember when that was running because I think I was too young for that. Lorraine, they had Cleveland. There's only 2 docks anymore. There's one in Toledo and the one in Sandusky. They're the only coal loading docks in Lake Erie anymore. So I've seen a lot of changes in the 40 years that I had been doing this. It's kind of sad. I don't know what he's doing there. Oh, this is at night. He's looking down in the cargo. It doesn't really, not details is very good. What's this? This is a guy laying on the belt right now. This is the unloading belt down here, and he's putting hoses along the edges of these gates that unload because we're getting ready to load grain. Of course, you don't want iron ore grit in your Cheerios, so we got to make sure it's clean. Grain is very fine. It will seep through all these gates, and of course, you got to be inspected, make sure they're clean. But don't blame me if you get grit in your Cheerios, because I don't work there anymore. So he's got to lay in the belt. It's very labor intensive. These guys are incredible. Everybody says, "Yeah, Americans don't work anymore." Well, these guys worked a lot. They worked all hours, and they made a lot of money. But these guys are just phenomenal because you're up all night. You're up all night, and then you get 3 hours of sleep, and you got to get up again. And they do it, and they don't. Well, they complain, but a complaining sailor is a happy sailor. So here we are. We're going to load grain up in Superior, Wisconsin. A whole different show right there. Obviously, they used to load and unload grain when they had the grain elevator in Huron, which is unfortunate. I didn't get to go there either. Now it's gone. Everything's gone in Huron. Oh man. Anyhow, so this is their loading grain. You have all the longshoremen coming on, and they would load you up, and then you can see it's very dusty. It's dusty when you unload it now because you traditionally used to unload it with these elevators. They'd lower down into the cargo hold, and then they push it in with tractors, and then they have shovelers. It was a major labor-intensive operation, but it was good because you were in port a long time. Now you're not in port a long time. Less time to go up the street drinking. Damn. Here they are. They're trimming the boat. Blah blah blah. This is a bill of lading telling you how much we loaded. 553,807 bushels of grain. It came up to 33,000 tons or pounds. 33 million. Excuse me. Don't ask me to do the math on that. Okay, we're going to leave. We're going to back out. No tugs. We're going to back out. Go around the corner. We're going to back out in St. Louis Bay. There's a saltwater boat. He's loading grain. We're going to continue to back out. There we go. We're still backing out. Now we're going to go forward. We're going to head out through the Duluth entrance and head to Buffalo, New York. Here's the skyline. We just left the Duluth Piers. It's beautiful because it's on the hillside of Duluth, and it's very pretty at night. This is a spider web with grain dust on it. And I thought that was kind of neat because it really brought out the details of a spider web. When we get out in the lake, they always hose the deck. They always hose all the spillage. There's regulations about that. You know, grain is not toxic. Coal, you have to be so far offshore. Iron ore, you have to be so far offshore. There's a lot of places you can't do it. So anyhow, they rinse the boat as we're going down the lake. Now we're heading to Buffalo. It all goes to Buffalo. Buffalo at one time was the largest exporter of grain in the world until the 50s, until the St. Lawrence Seaway opened up, which is amazing because they have this, it's called Elevator Alley, and there's grain elevator. They used to unload the grain elevators, load it up in the canal boats, then go take it out to the Seaway. And now that's the skyline of Buffalo coming in. That's the old Buffalo Lighthouse built in 1833, still operating, but apparently not as old as Marblehead's, because Marblehead's the oldest continuous operating lighthouse on the Great Lakes, as you all know, because you all live here, right? All right, so here we're going in. That's the little SS Little Rock. Behind us, the Sullivan Brothers. It's a military park, really neat. If you ever go to Buffalo, it's a cool town. It didn't used to be years ago. A lot of sailors got rolled in that town. It was an industrial town, dirty, stinky river. We don't have any of those around here, do we, anymore? I think Huron had that too. Anyhow, well, okay, we're going up the Buffalo River. This at one time was a very, very busy river with lots of boats, a lot of grain traffic coming in and out. That dome to the left is where the Buffalo Sabres play. We're going to go right. To the right is General Mills elevator, where they do actually make Cheerios there. You can smell it. It smells very good. You know, like a bakery. When you go by a bakery, they always smell good. Anyhow, very winding river. No tugs. Well, we do take a tug up this river, and we got to go way up through the bridges. This is the Ohio Street Bridge. And, okay, went through the Michigan Street Bridge, then we're going to go through Ohio Street Bridge. You can see elevator to the left there. We have a tug on the bow. They brought the steering pole in because it's going to get real tight. When we go around the corner, we have to pull it in because we have to get real close to reach out. So you got to get those branches to touch your bow. The tug pulls back on your bow. It uses the pivot so you can get around. It's kind of a tough corner because years ago, ships weren't this length. They never thought ships of this length would ever go up there. They were all 600-foot boats. Anyhow, there we go. Lots of elevators. They're still there. This is how you work the crew. It's a long 18-hour unload. It's not like this boat could unload iron ore in 5 hours, but grains, it's a slow process. And this is what they do now. This is how they unload in these silos, not like the old days. And they have all this dust suppression and this and that. And now we're going to leave. So you got to back out. And then we have a tug again, which is nice. But you have to bring the stern up really high because you're fanning a lot of air because of the shallow water. You don't want to damage your propeller or rudder backing out. So you don't have a lot of control. This tug will take us out. And it's just opposite. But we're going the other way. You wouldn't know that. This is Edward M. Cotter. I just threw that in there because she is the oldest operating fire tug in the world, and it was built in 1900 and it's still operating. They use it for breaking ice in the winter so the Buffalo River doesn't have an ice jams. I think they took it around the Great Lakes for a while. So anyhow, threw that in. Now the other river you go to, another river, of course the Cuyahoga is the worst river to go to. I don't know why steel companies always thought to build it up the river because they're not easy to get to. We're going in the Rouge River to go to the Ford steel mill, which is now, I think it's owned by Cliffs. Anyhow, so we're going up the river, very tight, railroad bridges. Well, there's a train on the bridge. You got to stop, got to wait. This happens all the time. Suppose you're supposed to have the right of way, but you don't. So, tour boat and the river. All right, bridge is going up. We're going up the Rouge River. Very tight, going through the bridges. Again, in that river, you're on the bottom when you go up loaded, so you can hear like the bottom scraping on the bottom, like probably somebody's car or something like that. And the boat would actually list over. And there's some you have to get a running start to get through the bridge. And there's certain part of the bridge you want to be left on the favor of the left side or the right side. So it's an art form. just, you have your mates. They're always telling you how far you are off things. You got all these marks on the land, and they're like, well, I can start my turn when this stack lines up with that sign. Or we used to steer on the I-75 bridge, when we would come through one of the bridges, And these guys, these wheelsmen, all know what to steer on. Same in the rivers, you always steer on different landmarks, ranges. Sometimes you steer on somebody's garage. They didn't know you're steering on their garage. So anyhow, it's a windy river. Now we're at the roost still. You obviously can't get up against the dock because it's all full of gunk in the bottom. You got to force yourself to get up there. So there we go. We're taking out the hatches with the iron deckhand. All right, now you can see how tight it is going through the bridges. And unfortunately, sometimes the bridges don't open. This is a mate in the front window. He's not driving in the river. I would do that. The captain, he does all ship landing. He's there for the locks and then all the tight places. And I'm sorry. So that shows our pilot house. We have 2 radars. Radar. This is the stern thruster control. Bow thruster controls. He's in the way. The GPS charts, all state-of-the-art stuff now, which is pretty neat. You know where other boats are because they have AIS. Which is pretty neat. There, got mail. I'm going to send out the timesheets. I'm obviously pretty happy, I guess. This is the wheelsman. You tell him what to steer course to steer on, whatever. He lives in Fairview Park. He's a good friend. This is some of the crew, all gussied up. That's where we had an open house, which was kind of neat to make sailors to try to clean them up and dress them up. They did a phenomenal job. We had like 10,000 people tour the ship that day. It was really one of the neater things I did. There's my wife. Been married 41 years. Not a lot of marriages last in a steamboater's life. It's hard. It's difficult, and she raised these kids, I say I've been married 41 years, but probably only married 21 years because I was on a ship half the year. So I'd be gone 6 months a year. So she's a rock, man. She's solid. She's at Ohio State Gibraltar tonight. She couldn't attend, unfortunately. But that's the rest of the pilot house. Of course, now we got computers, and now probably everybody's on their cell phones, not looking out the window. So if you got your boat and you see a ship coming, assume they might not be seeing you because they're probably on their damn phones. Propeller. This is one of the propellers on the steamer. Sometimes we have to inspect them. How we do it is we flood our forward ballast tanks because we have like 7 tanks. One on each side. It would be 14. We flood the forward tanks, pump out the after tanks. We can inspect our propellers or wheels, as we call them. There we are. We're nice. Wonderful. It's awful. It's even worse on 1,000-footers. Here we're breaking ice. This is a terrible winter in the St. Mary's River. You have escorts taking you up and down, making the turns for you. This is the newest Mackinac. She's very maneuverable, but she's not as beamy as the old one, which was built in 1944, which is a museum up in Mackinac City. This is a buoy tender, which are also not considered heavy icebreakers. They were built up in Marionette, Menominee. Again, a 140 convoy. Sometimes you have to convoy to get across the lake because it's the whole lake is froze. Lake Superior, Lake Erie, it's not a big deal, It's because we freeze a lot. This shows us going through the ice from the bow. Steam is probably very cold. You can see again, that's snow. That's what they call hoarfrost because it's like 10, 20 below. And you have the fog, the sea fog coming up around the boat. I think here it's actually a warm day. It's only 5 degrees, which is pretty warm for Lake Superior in January. It's called a blood bunny. We have to work that time of the year because nothing works. Everything breaks down. Crew's in a miserable mood because they all want to be home. And this is the largest icebreaker. This is the largest Canadian icebreaking asset, the Risley. They also can do buoy tending and all that sort of thing. You can see a lot of the ice buildup on these ships coming out of the locks. Case of J. Callaway, a U.S. steel boat. More ice. That's the White Shoal Light. Used to be the brightest light on the Great Lakes. That's in the Straits of Mackinac on the west of the bridge. They always nicknamed the barber pole. That's always a lot of congestion there in the spring and the winter. More ice. You see the ice accumulation. What they do, we got to get that ice off because it adds a lot of weight to the boat. Also, it affects the stability. So they have boilers that'll get going and they'll have hot water hoses to melt the ice. Or they got these big, giant wooden mallets to pound the decks and break the ice up. It's because if you can't get the hatches open, you can't load the boat. So then you're kind of in big trouble there. Another picture. That boat's in Huron, in Marblehead about every other day. That American Courage. Interesting cloud formations, like I said, in Lake Superior. So that's what I'm kind of showing. That again, waves, wind, fall. You're always worrying about wind, waves. What's it going to be like when you get to the other end of the lake? If you're going to get to the other end of the lake and you can't get in the port, what do? Turn around and go back? Can't do that. So you're always trying to think ahead, because you got 24 hours to get across Lake Superior. And where are you going to hide? Where are you going to get a lee shore where you can you get a good ride out of it? But they have anchors on boats, and I'm not afraid to use an anchor, because maybe the Fitzgerald should have used an anchor instead of going out. But back then, that was a big modern boat, and they could go through anything until they couldn't go through anything. So to give you an idea of the size of the waves coming over the deck, probably wish I had dropped the anchor that day. Fog. Fog is another enemy. We've gone up and down the rivers, not ever seen the shoreline. And you can't even see the stern of your boat because the fog's so thick. You could basically see a ship in the distance, which, if you can see that far, that's good visibility, believe it or not. This more pictures. That's a Canadian ship we're meeting. More fog. This is up in the Sioux. You get a lot of fog up in the Sioux River, especially around 4 in the morning. That's the Herbert G. Jackson. She is aground in the Saginaw River. We had that in 2009. We had another recession again. And so I got bumped back. And the guy that relieved me immediately put that up on the bank and blocked the river. And I got off. I said, I can't take it. Anyhow, Rouge River. They thought the boat went through the bridge. This bridge tender dropped the bridge on the ship. And this is what happened. It was the Jefferson Street Bridge, the first bridge when you come into the Rouge entry. The bridge tender was basically drunk. Well, was drunk, and no longer is a bridge tender. Ruined the bridge. They had to build a new one. Just kind of, fortunately, I wasn't on that boat when that happened. It was the Herbert G. Jackson. So what's the nice thing about the lake? I mean, you get up north, you have beautiful sky. You don't have any light pollution. You have stars. You have the northern lights. It's incredible. 4 in the morning, you get the northern lights just shooting across the sky. You have beautiful skies. That light is not a planet. That's actually the range like the stern. So that is a moon. You guys probably know that. There's another moon. But we have all the deck lights on. Sunrises. Never get tired of sunrises or sunsets. This is a winter sunrise. Of course, in the winter, when you get up north, the days are short. You only probably have about 7 hours of daylight. Now, during the summer solstice, you probably only have 4 hours of darkness, because you get up in Lake Superior, it doesn't even get dark till 11:30 at night, and it's starting to get light by 4 in the morning. So that's why summer sailing. I say love summer sailing, because it's light time. Daylight's always great. This is just common. Water spouts, more sunsets, sunrises. It goes on and on and on. Not a bad job. Not a bad job. Detroit River Light, entrance to the Detroit River. You had to follow the guy came down. When you get a half a mile, you're supposed to turn. He didn't turn. He ran right into that, dead on. He no longer is working, but it was sad how accidents happen. If you do something long enough, something happens. Do you know the difference between a fairy tale and a sea story? You heard this joke? Okay. A fairy tale, starts once upon a time. Sea story is, this is no shit. Yeah. I had to make sure there's no kids around here. Anyone talk dirty. This is north. All the ships go north of Pelion, because that's where the deep water is. Even though it's not that deep, because a 1,000-foot ship will cavitate. We can't even go full speed till we get east of Pelion, because you're feeling the bottom, you're cavitating. The boat will shake in shallow water. You'll shake everything apart. So anyhow, this is middle ground shoulder, Pele Passage Light. Canadians are the ones that always have the helicopter pads on. That's Fort Gratiot Light. Again, I'm sorry. That's the head of Lake Huron, or Lake St. Clair River. Blah. So that's also a beautiful lighthouse. This is Southeast Shoal. You guys have boat, you might have seen that. It's all rock. Rock's not very forgiving. So you don't want to get off course there. That's why there's so many shipwrecks in the west end of Lake Erie. but they're all covered with mussels. Obviously, the some old pictures of this is probably in Conneaut of the old-fashioned way of unloading boats. These were leaf hatches. They always had to tarp them after they put every single one on, and didn't have an iron deckhand. Another old picture. Now the ore dock here, was that nickel plate or was that B&O? What do you guys know what that was? Was it nickel plate? Okay, that's what I thought. But I thought it had like the B&O Railroad or something serviced it. But, all right. Anyhow, another really old picture. A lot of labor intensive. These are old wooden hatches. They had to literally lift them on. The hatches were all, again, spaced evenly apart for the loading docks, the ore docks. And that's it. These are all the contributors to this wonderful program. And I think that's about all. You can all wake up now. It's all good. You get a meeting now. But I guess I'm going to answer questions. Do you have time to do that now, or you want to do it later? Okay, make them easy because I'm not real smart. Yes, sir. When they started building the new boats, because it left more area for cargo. And plus the new boats had like that round bow. It's all about more capacity. So the closer you make it to a box, the more they haul. It's only on the Great Lakes that they had the forward pilot house. I don't know why they did it, but obviously now they don't. I think the last one with the forward pilot house may have been the Roger Blau, but don't quote me on that. Yes, what do you know? Yes. Well, yeah, you're going to anchor in the Detroit River because you got to go to that Livingston Channel. Everybody knows when the wind blows hard out of the southwest, it will drop up to 6 feet in Toledo, and you only sometimes have like a foot and a half underneath your hull, and so that's always very nerve-wracking. Same with up at the Sioux River. You have to go through a couple of really tight passages called Rock Cut, and you have a fathometer, and the red light comes on, saying like, and that's all rock, and so yeah, you have to anchor. It's too shallow. Yeah, it's same with in Buffalo. When it blows southwest, they have water over their docks, because it's so high there. It's just opposite effect. Yes. Anybody? Yes.
Talking a lot of scraping, both on the sides and the bottom.
Yes.
Boats inspected every year.
Every 5 years. Every 5 years, and I've gone under when they've done inspections. You'd think there'd be damage. There isn't any damage. Of course, it's pretty solid on the bottom. And yeah, you think when the boat's actually listing over, because they have these lights on to tell you, so the boat's always in trim. When they load in at the loaders, want to keep it on even keel. So, yeah. But yeah, that's a weird scraping noise. It was like that in when I remember going up the Cuyahoga River, man. Not to mention all the sludge and smelly stuff. The thrusters would come out from the bottom and all these dead fish, and they'd go through the thruster and they stunk too. Terrible. Well, when I first started, there was around 26, 27, and then when we came through the recession in the 80s, we had to be competitive. So they dropped it down to about 19 on the ships, and with them being converted from steam to diesel, they have an unmanned engine room now, so you don't have to have an engineer on watch. They work days, but they'd be on call. So yeah, it's all about getting the crew size down because there's only so many expenses you can control on a boat. Well, what we have is 3 mates, and then we have a captain. The mates will work 4 hours on, 8 hours off. The same with the engine room. They'd have 3 engineers that worked watches, and they'd have a day engineer, and then the chief, who would be kind of work the same time the captain does when you're in confined waters, making docks and departing docks and locks. And then usually the day crew, like the deckhands, they work regular 8-hour day shift, except that we're going to be in a dock at night, so you have to save their hours so you don't get into overtime, and then it gets a little tricky.
All the pictures about the ice.
Yeah.
What's the threshold that they can't go through the ice?
Well, if it's you got blue ice. Who goes? If you go or you don't go?
Yeah.
That's the captain. Oh yeah. You sign your name on that piece of paper, man. You're the first one that's going to be in front of a Coast Guard inquiry. Why did you do that? Well, because you don't make money with the boat stopped at the dock. You don't make money when it's sitting waiting for weather. You always got that pressure on you, because you got to keep that boat moving. Well, you get stuck. Well, then you call the Coast Guard. Said, well, I need an icebreaker to help me get out, particularly in the rivers. But the thickest ice, that ice in the first ice is always very hard, that blue ice. But in the spring, it breaks up and it turns into slush, and then the boats keep pushing it, and it keeps banking up and banking up. So you'll have ice underneath your hull, and you can't move. You just can't move. It's real sticky. There's no place to move. Well, plate ice, you can push that to the side, but slush ice, you really can't move it anywhere. That's why when you had a big icebreaker like the Mackinac, the old Mackinac, she'd be on your stern, and when you make the turn, she would push the ice away, so your stern had a weight you could move to make the turn. And then they'll say, okay, you got it, and then they leave you, and you had 2 more degrees to make the turn, and they're like, oh, you got to come back now, and it take 4 hours to make one turn in a river, particularly the St. Mary's River, when you have to go around Nebish Island, because they're all hard turns. And yeah. Every 5 years you have to renew. And I just renewed, but you have to have 1 year of service in 5 years, and I didn't have it, so I had to do an open book test. And I hadn't taken a test in a long time, but it was open book, so I passed. So I'm going to get my license again, but I don't know if I'll use it. I'm supposed to bring the new Miller Ferry down in 2022. I think maybe in a week or two, but they've already changed that a couple of times, and now I don't know. I'd get somebody else to do it. It's summertime. I got family coming to visit. I got grandkids. I don't have time to be on a boat. What are you talking about? So I don't know, but that ferry boat's going to be done here soon. A second ferry boat, new and improved. So, yeah, sure. What can I? I knew that question was going to come. Big waves. Tell us about the big waves. The worst boat ride it was ever on was on that 60-foot Yankee Clipper that ran for Parker Boat Lines in 1975. It was the day the Fitzgerald sank. And I think it was my first year out of high school, and I was laid off from the Miller Ferry. So for Middlebass, I rode this ferry boat. Now, that boat was built to go across the Sound to Sanibel Island before Parker's brought it up when they built the bridge. And I swear we went ahead 2 feet and went back 1 foot. It took 3 hours to do an hour and 15-minute trip. And all the cars were scooting around, and things were flying, and all the other boats quit. That was the worst ride. But in 1984, I had been laid off for 1.5 years, and they called me out to go out around Christmas. Can you believe it? People want to go home for Christmas. And we started cracking in half. But we weren't loaded. We were light. But we had this captain loved to go fast. And he'd tell you, we've been so lucky we didn't have any rough weather all winter, all fall. Well, they got their butts kicked all the time. Well, she started working so much because it was a very fast boat. It was a boat built deep sea, Elton Hoyt II, and I was a third mate, hadn't worked for 1.5 years, and the deckhand's coming in. We're thinking we're going to go down, and I'm like, we're not going down. It's 10 below zero. I'm not going anywhere. But they were walking. They have these walk tunnels under each side below the deck, so they could walk from fore to aft without being out in the weather. Years ago, they always had a line from the forward mast to aft mast where they would take a line to keep you from getting washed over the side. But anyhow, short story line, they saw the daylight because they were walking the tunnels. If it had been nighttime and no one would walk it, we could have kept working and working until she snapped in half. But then I couldn't tell you the rest of the story. So, but that was pretty scary, and it was just before Christmas. And then this is in Lake Huron, so we had a Coast Guard escort. We stopped at Detroit River. They welded channel iron on the deck, and it was a really, really cold winter. I think it was 1983. So they said, okay, you got to take a tug escort to Ashtabula. We're going to lay up in Ashtabula. So we went through ice until we got to Piedon, and they got storm warnings up. Well, this captain, he lives in Ashtabula. He's going to be home with his happy Hungarian wife, and so we're going to go. And the tug says, I'm not going. So we got to Ashtabula. It was too rough. We sat for 1.5 days with 2 anchors and rolled and rolled and rolled after all this stuff we had to deal with. And everybody's on pins and needles. So we finally got in Christmas Day. People that didn't even drink went up and had a drink that night because we were so happy to be home. But you know what? That was worse. Ever since then, my company didn't like me too much because I probably anchored too much. I had to anchor a 1,000-foot ship, which I maybe didn't need to. So I was a little shell-shocked from that. But yeah, that's a comic. They want to hear about the big waves, big waves. Before that, prior to that, I thought it was pretty neat. You know, you just slow down. You just slow the boat down. You can tell when the boat, you know, starts bucking, and you can stand on the end of a 1,000-foot ship and watch the deck, and it probably goes up about 7-8 feet. But it's a 1,000-foot length. You could go in the tunnels and watch them creaking, but they're made to do that because they're strengthened longitudinally, not horizontally. So they're made to work in the sea like that. But you don't want to work too much when you start feeling like bucking like that. You know, we got to slow down. You gotta know your boat. So that's my biggest sea story. That's no shit. Okay.
Were you able to take Lisa along?
Oh yeah, anytime. As captain, when you're an officer, you could have them for 2 weeks a year, but it only could be from I think May 1st to October 1st. Our company was the first and probably the only company that let unlicensed people have their spouses or family aboard. You know, it wasn't always easy because you had to share a bunk or something like that. Not real comfortable, but it was very nice because, you know, when you spend your whole life doing it, it's nice that your family could share, see what you actually do. So yeah, but once you're captain, she could ride all the time, and she rode all the time because she could eat. She had it made. She slept all the time. She ate. She didn't have to do dishes. And of course, they always try to suck up to the captain's wife. You know, oh, we brought you some cookies, and you know. And right now, I don't rate very high anymore. So she rode a lot. She loved it. She still wants to go out on a boat ride. We had a Canadian female captain sailed the Canadian line in the 70s. Lillian something else. She went to in Canada. They have Georgia Bay College. That's their equivalent of the Great Lakes Maritime Academy in Traverse City. And I think there's one other female captain on the Great Lakes. And we had some really phenomenal female officers, but you know, it's kind of like they just want to make money to do something else. Sometimes they meet a sailor and get married. That's happened, but it's we get a lot of females, you know, in the galley. We get some female deckhands, a lot of that go to the Maritime Academy, but some make a career of it, but not a lot. No reason they can't. There's no reason they can't at all. But you know. It's about the same. Actually, there's probably more Canadians now. But the Canadians don't have any 1,000-foot ships because you can't get through the Welland Canal if you're bigger than 740 feet long by 75 feet wide. So like Interlake only has 2 boats that are even small enough to get up in the Lake Ontario. So I never went to Lake Ontario. I never went up through the Seaway until a Canadian friend of mine invited me to go for a ride on his ship with Algoma, a Canadian fella, which was really kind of neat. Get to go up to Quebec City and up the... Oh, yeah, 52 maybe, 52 now, maybe 48. A lot of boats didn't sail this year. A few more boats haven't been out. It was kind of slow out of the gate, and then the COVID thing kind of hurt business. But the worst recession was that one in the 80s. We went from 10 boats to 2, and I didn't know if I was ever going to get back out. A lot of people left the industry after that and never came back. But yeah, it's you know, we're back, you know, 75 years ago there was hundreds of ships. As far as the eye could see. So it's too bad.
Yeah.
That's the way it goes. Yes, sir.
Are there still a lot of salties out there?
Yeah, saltwater trade's been doing really good because they're moving a lot of grain out of the Great Lakes right now, out of Thunder Bay and Duluth Superior. Lots of salties, and now we got the cruise ships. They've got a whole bunch of cruise ships. That's the biggest growing sector of the cruise industry is coming into the Great Lakes, and they're mostly Americans that are buying these trips of all things, you know, because it's easy. You don't have to get on a plane. You don't have to go overseas. You don't have to deal with any of that thing. So, but they're about $10,000 per person to take a trip on the Great Lakes. But they're small ships. You're not going to be with thousands of people. I think some only hold like 100 passengers. I did a talk on one of the ships. It was a Victory cruise ship, and they only held 100 people. And it's pretty neat. So, pardon me? No, not at all. No, not at all. But I have a friend of mine who was a captain. He went to the Maritime Academy. He went there. He had no idea. He just saw this catalog. He could become a Great Lakes sailor. He went there, but he got seasick, and he ended up being a captain. You know, I remember meeting these guys. They couldn't even tie up a rowboat. You know, and then they made captains out of everybody. But it's you know, the job is mostly probably 90% common sense and having the situation awareness of what you're doing. You know, you can be book smart, but it's not gonna. That doesn't dock a boat. So you're only as good as the last stock you made also. That's another saying. Yep, because whatever can happen will happen. You do something long enough. I had a saltwater boat. I was discussing with somebody else in the farm. I was able to take a 1,000-foot ship and to load coal in Sandusky, which I think they've only had 1,000-foot ship in there before. And of course, we came through the Bay Channel and turned off the dock. And I was glad I could do it because, like, oh man, you know, when I come into Sandusky, I blow the horn. And who are you blowing horns? I said, I know a lot of dead people in this town. So at 4 in the morning, I blast the whistle, give a salute. But anyhow, I brought the 1,000-foot in. We loaded just like 2/3 of a cargo because it's difficult because it's a 1,000-foot ship loading at a small coal dock. So, but we got up to Detroit, and just before we got to the end of the river, the fog set in, and they have a up and downbound channel to get into the Detroit River. Upbound, you go past Amherstburg, which is like just ricocheting currents back and forth. You don't want to do that if you can't see range lights, which everybody knows where the range light is, or maybe not. Where if the range are lined up, you're where you're supposed to be. Anyhow, we waited for the downbounders to clear the Livingston Channel so we could go upbound. So we were just treading water, had to wait for 2 salties to come down. Now they're all racing to get out the seaway because it's going to close. So last salty comes down. Next thing you know, I have a watchman on the bow. I say, hey, this guy's going to hit us. Oh, okay. Well, we're going 5 miles an hour. You goose the engine on a 1,000-footer. You don't even notice it's moving yet because it takes a while to get it moving, and it takes a while to get it stopped. So the mate, they were going to meet us on the port side, which means if you turn right, you're going to miss them. The only problem is you're so close. By the time the arc of your swing, because your pivot point on a ship is about 1/3 from the bow aft. So you got this big pendulum. We're going to be swinging a stern into this guy if we do this. So I countered the mate and said, no, we got to go hard left. So we took a glancing blow, and this saltwater guy, he had a pilot on board. Coast Guard called him. He didn't answer the radio. Wouldn't answer the radio. He was a hit and run. It was what it was, a hit and run. So they finally stopped him when he got to Port Colborne. Of course, he's like the head of the pilots. And the pilots, they never get in trouble for anything. And I was dead to rights because now they have GPS where you can see the other boat, and you can see their course, you can see their speed, you can see the point of impact. So it was all right there on the screen to prove that I was innocent, of course. But in maritime law, it's not like civil law. You know, they'll always find something. You'll always get partial fault. Even a guy tattoos you. Maybe you didn't do something right. You didn't sound the general alarm. You didn't do something right. So he's 90% at fault. You're 10% at fault. This is how they always do these cases. And mostly they'll settle out of court because you don't want to get into litigation anyhow. I'm sure this salty probably had a couple $100,000 of damage. We had very little, some bent frames, knock on wood. And but that's kind of scary, seeing a guy come out of the fog, gonna hit you. Ruined my day. Yeah, what did it say? Collision at sea ruins your day? True story. Don't let it happen to you if you can avoid it. And of course, you guys all know, you have to assume any pleasure boater doesn't know the rules of the road. So you have to assume that they're not going to give away when you're the privileged boat. So just stay out of everybody's way. Yes.